I didn't sleep with the sommelier in Napa. Everyone assumes that's what happened. But the truth is so much more pathetic. Marcus keeps telling his colleagues he's away on critical acquisitions, and I let them think he's a workaholic who abandoned our marriage. The reality is he left because I betrayed him with something far more intimate than sex, and I haven't been brave enough to correct the narrative. My entire social circle thinks I'm the wounded wife, that he's punishing me by taking these weekend business trips. They've started sending me texts about emotional abuse and offering their guest rooms. What they don't understand is that I'm the architect of this exile, and the foundation I cracked wasn't our vows, but something more fundamental. I told myself I was reclaiming my identity when I let Sophie kiss me under those vineyard lights, but I was actually destroying the only safe space Marcus had left. The whole story is so much worse than anyone imagines, and I need to explain how I managed to weaponize my own awakening against the person who loved me most. I still remember the weight of my neglected phone vibrating in my tote bag that Friday afternoon. Marcus had planned our 10-year anniversary with the precision of a military operation. Private wine cave dinner, couples massage, a suite with a view of the valley that cost more than our first car. I'd spent the previous 6 months drowning in suburban monotony, my law degree gathering dust, while I coordinated preschool fundraisers, and felt my sharp edges sanded down by playdates and grocery lists. The woman who boarded our flight to Napa wasn't the ambitious litigator he'd married. She was a ghost wearing Lululemon and carrying a mom bag crammed with snacks we didn't need. The first hint I should have recognized came during the drive from the airport. Marcus kept glancing at his phone, his jaw tight in that particular way I'd learned to ignore. "Just work scrambling without me," he muttered, but his thumb hovered over the screen like he wanted to call someone, not text. I filed it away as more of the same. His startup would always be his first love, and I'd accepted my role as the practical spouse who kept our life running. When we checked into the hotel, I caught him studying my face with an intensity that made me squirm, as if memorizing features he'd soon forget. The second breadcrumb landed during our tasting at Domaine Carneros. I posted a photo of our champagne flutes, and within minutes, a college friend commented, "Gorgeous. Is that the place you and Marcus went before he got funded?" I stared at her question, my thumb frozen over the reply. We'd never been there before. I didn't know Marcus had visited Napa with anyone else. The realization that he'd brought someone else on this supposedly sacred ritual felt like swallowing broken glass, and I responded with a breezy lie, "Yes, our special place," while Marcus was in the restroom. That night, after a dinner where we talked about the children we hadn't conceived and the dreams we deferred, I made my fatal decision. Marcus fell asleep at 9, exhausted from the performance of being a present husband. I took the hotel key card and wandered to the lobby bar, where Sophie sat alone with a book of Mary Oliver poems and a glass of something expensive. She asked me what I was afraid of, and I told her the truth. I was terrified of becoming a cautionary tale about women who lost themselves in service of someone else's ambition. She understood. When she kissed me in the rose garden at midnight, it felt like coming home to a version of myself I'd buried beneath layers of compromise. The next morning, I orchestrated the perfect confession. I waited until Marcus was showering, then left my phone on the nightstand with Sophie's number visible, her name saved simply as DC. I engineered his discovery, wanting him to confront me so I could unload my resentment like a weapon. When he emerged, towel around his waist and my phone in his hand, I saw something break behind his eyes. "Who is this?" he asked, voice flat. I told him about the kiss, the connection, the awakening. I expected anger, tears, a fight that would finally make us feel something real. Instead, he dressed in silence, packed his bag, and said, "I'm taking the earlier flight. Sort yourself out." By the time I returned to our empty house on Sunday, the narrative had already solidified in my mind. I told our couple's therapist that Marcus had abandoned me after a momentary indiscretion born from loneliness. I told my sister he'd weaponized my honesty. I posted vague, wounded updates about growth and betrayal that my followers devoured. Marcus didn't contradict any of it. He simply started leaving Thursday nights and returning Sunday evenings with the rhythm of a man who'd found somewhere else to be. The first weekend, I assumed he was with someone else. I drank too much wine and called him at 2 a.m., slurring accusations through tears that were mostly performance. He answered on the first ring, his voice steady, "I'm at my mother's, Claire." "Don't call this number again." I laughed bitterly. His mother lived 20 minutes away, and he'd never visited her once in our entire marriage. Nice try, I sneered and hung up. The second weekend, our neighbor Karen mentioned seeing Marcus at the hospital near his mother's house. Such a devoted son, she said, and I felt the first crack in my foundation. That wasn't possible. His mother was a healthy 68-year-old who played tennis twice a week. I'd seen her Instagram stories from the club just days before our Napa trip. I called the hospital, feigned concern, and learned no patient named Evelyn Hart was registered. The lie was clumsy, almost insulting. By the third weekend, I'd convinced myself he was building a separate life. I hired someone through a friend's divorce lawyer, not a private investigator, just a college kid with a camera. What I got back were photos of Marcus sitting in a generic suburban house, holding the hand of a woman my mother's age while she slept in a recliner. The timestamps showed him there for 48 hours straight, leaving only for coffee runs. He looked destroyed in a way I'd never seen, not angry, not vengeful, just hollowed out. That's when I remembered the phone calls. During our Napa weekend, while Sophie and I were talking about Rilke and authenticity, Marcus had called 7 times. I'd silenced my phone after the third ring, annoyed by his neediness. The voicemails were still sitting in my deleted folder, automatically erased after 30 days. I recovered them with shaking hands. The first was timestamped Friday at 11:47 p.m. Claire, it's Mom. She's had a stroke. They're saying it's bad. Please call me back. The second, Saturday at 6:12 a.m. Where are you? The doctor needs to know about her medication. Claire, I need you. The third, Saturday at 3:33 p.m. She's unconscious. I'm making decisions alone. I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. Please just call. The final voicemail, Sunday at 7:45 a.m., was just Marcus's breathing, 30 seconds of ragged, wet gasps that sounded like a man being torn apart from the inside. Then a woman's voice in the background, sir, you need to come say goodbye. Sophie and I had been eating oysters and talking about leaving our husbands when Marcus was watching his mother flatline. I told myself my betrayal was a kiss, a moment of connection, but my real infidelity was choosing my own narrative over his emergency. I'd performed vulnerability while he was actually breaking. The business trips weren't punishment, they were grief. While I was building my story of abandonment, Marcus was sitting Shiva in a house he'd bought for his mother, trying to keep her affairs in order. The competitor I'd leaked his company's vulnerability to through my anonymous Instagram had used the information to poach his clients while he was burying his mother. Every weekend he disappeared to repair damage I'd caused, both personally and professionally. My defensiveness reached its peak when I confronted him with the photos. Who is she? I demanded, waving the pictures of the woman in the recliner. Marcus looked at me with such profound exhaustion that I nearly crumbled. That's my mother's hospice nurse, Claire, the woman whose calls you ignored while you were finding yourself. He didn't yell. He simply walked into his office and locked the door. The worst truth, the one that makes my confession real, is that I knew. By the second weekend, I'd put together the timeline. I'd seen the obituary online but scrolled past it, telling myself it wasn't my place to reach out to his family. I'd listened to those voicemails and deleted them again, unable to face what they meant about my character. I'd continued texting Sophie for 3 more weeks, needing to prove to myself that my feelings were valid, that my betrayal had been earned. I told my therapist that Marcus was emotionally unavailable, that his grief had become an impenetrable wall. I didn't mention that I'd built the wall brick by brick with my absence, and then decorated it with lies. When our friends started taking sides, I let them comfort me with casseroles and wine nights. I accepted their pity like a sacrament. The business trips continued, but their nature shifted. Marcus began acquiring companies, not his own, but his competitors. He'd become relentless, using his grief as fuel for a corporate scorched earth campaign. His lawyer called me one Tuesday, asking about our finances. He's liquidating everything, she said softly. I think you should know. I tracked him to a hotel in Palo Alto on the 4th weekend, not with a lover, but with a team of engineers pulling an all-nighter. I watched through the window as he pitched investors, his mother's wedding ring now on his right hand. He looked 10 years older and absolutely focused, like a man who'd lost everything and found something harder in the ashes. That's when I discovered the final layer. While I'd been performing the role of abandoned wife, Marcus had been documenting everything. He had screenshots of my texts with Sophie, timestamps showing I'd ignored his calls, records of my anonymous Instagram account where I'd monetized our marital breakdown. He'd hired a lawyer not to divorce me, but to negotiate a separation agreement that would force me to publicly retract my statements about his abandonment. He wanted his reputation back more than he wanted revenge. The business trips are his evidence-gathering missions now. Each weekend, he meets with people from our old life, couples who'd been our friends, colleagues who'd invested in his character, and tells them the truth. Not about my affair, but about my absence. He shows them the timeline: his mother's stroke, my silence, the leaked information, the carefully curated social media posts. He's not rebuilding a company, he's rebuilding a case. My sister stopped returning my calls last week. My mother sent me a text that just said, "Call Marcus. Tell the truth." Even my therapist asked if I'd been entirely honest in our sessions. The narrative I'd so carefully constructed was crumbling because Marcus had stopped protecting me from the consequences. Last night, he came home at midnight on a Sunday carrying a manila envelope. He set it on the kitchen counter between us like a peace offering made of paper cuts. "Inside is a draft of the statement I need you to make," he said. "It doesn't mention Sophie, it doesn't mention the kiss. It just says that during a family emergency you were unavailable, and I regret that we couldn't support each other better." He was giving me an out, a way to save face while still telling the truth. I opened the envelope and saw his handwriting in the margins. She didn't know. She didn't mean to. She's still the woman I married. He'd written excuses for me more generous than I'd ever offered him. The truth I need to confess, the one that makes all of this worse, is that I still text Sophie. Not because I love her, but because she represents the version of me who didn't fail so spectacularly. In my mind, that Claire was brave and honest, not cowardly and deceptive. I keep her in my phone like a souvenir from a person I never actually was. Marcus knows. He showed me the phone records he'd subpoenaed, the number still connecting at 2 a.m. on nights he wasn't home. "You're not grieving our marriage," he said. "You're grieving the story you told yourself about it." He was right. The business trips will stop at the end of this month. He's merging his company with a larger firm and taking a non-travel role. The separation agreement is signed, waiting only for my public statement. I have until Friday to decide if I want to post it on my Instagram, the account where I built a career documenting a marriage I was simultaneously destroying. Yesterday, I drove to his mother's house. The nurse still lives there, packing up Evelyn's things. She gave me a box labeled, "For Claire, open when ready." Inside were letters Evelyn had written me over the years, all unopened because I found them intrusive. The last one, dated the week before our Napa trip, said Marcus is scared his business is failing. He needs you to be his partner, not his cheerleader. Love, Mom. I sat on her porch and read every word. Marcus had been telling his mother the truth while I was performing perfection for strangers. The business I'd leaked wasn't just his livelihood, it was his attempt to build something stable enough for us to start a family. He'd been carrying that hope alone while I was staging my awakening. This morning, I posted a photo of our empty dining room table. No caption. The comments immediately flooded in with support and outrage on my behalf. Marcus texted me 5 minutes later, "You have 48 hours to post the statement, or I post the truth. Your choice." For the first time, I believed he would. Not out of malice, but because he'd finally learned to protect himself from my narrative. I'm writing this now because tomorrow I have to decide which version of events becomes public record. The one where I'm the victim of an absent husband, or the one where I'm the architect of my own isolation. The business trips weren't abandonment. They were the only way Marcus could grieve without watching me perform grief for an audience. The real infidelity wasn't a kiss in a vineyard, it was choosing to be a protagonist in my own story instead of a partner in our crisis. Maybe that's what everyone gets wrong. They think I cheated with Sophie. But I cheated on Marcus with myself, with a version of me that existed only in contrast to him. And he let me, right up until he couldn't anymore. When he comes home this Sunday, I'll be sitting at that empty table with the box of Evelyn's letters and my phone. I'll ask him which statement he wants me to make. Not because I'm giving him control, but because I'm finally ready to admit I never deserved to have it all. The woman who kissed Sophie in Napa is dead, and the woman typing this isn't sure what comes next. But for the first time, I'm not performing. I'm just here, in the wreckage I built, waiting for my husband to stop protecting me from the sound of it falling.